There you go. Welcome to the 63rd episode of the Korea podcast. I forgot to do the blast of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Today is, what's today? The 11th of May, another Monday. We skipped last week's episode for, I think it was Children's Day. Bruno is with us today, and we were discussing Before we get into the whole explanation, if you notice, Bruno is live and I am not. And the reason for that is that my camera was being wonky and it's just decided not to function about 3 hours prior to the podcast. I tried to set it up. It completely was unsuccessful. So I decided to just pin my still image. And so that's what it is. The Korea podcast is a podcast in which we talk about anything and everything related to living in South Korea, as well as running, starting and operating ESL businesses such as Hagwon business, which is a larger school, and Gombubangs, which are a smaller version, kind of usually run from home businesses. And in today's podcast, Bruno, this was actually Bruno's idea. He was very keen on it. He wanted to hop on and talk about the 7 habits of highly effective people, the book by, I forget his name.
Stephen R.
Covey. Stephen R. Covey. And how it applies, how the 7 habits or how the book, its principles apply to teaching. I guess not exclusively ESL teaching, right?
No, I mean it's a framework to work with in your life, really, because it affects who you are. It will. I mean, if you read it carefully, the book carefully, and absorb the information, it will shape your life. And it's a kind of book I recommend young people to read. I wish I had read it when I was younger. I read it in my 30s, I guess. So it affects your whole life. And yeah, of course, and you can apply it to teaching because it's their habits, their principles, basically, that are very, so that they can change your life, they can change your teaching style, your teaching career even. It has,
All right. So that's what's on the menu, and so basically Bruno's the only one who read this book. I didn't actually read the book myself. I did take a look on YouTube. There is a whole row of videos by the author, and they're basically what do you call them?
Summary.
Yeah, presentation. No, it wasn't even in a summary. It was actually like a several hour long speech he gave, I think, right after having published the book, because the videos look pretty old. And he was basically, talking about, about the book itself and the details and whatnot. So I had a look at those, which was a while back, and I guess it's stuck in the back of my mind somewhere. But Bruno has been very adamant about telling me that I should read it. So one of these days I will actually pick up the book and read it. But Bruno's going to kind of be leading the conversation today, I believe, because, he's the well-read man here. So here we go. Floor is yours, Bruno.
Okay, so let's get started. So, I mean, this book, it says from the outset that it's an old book. Yeah, it's from 1950s, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. And it says from the outset, like, if you start reading this book, you have to start applying it, and it can be something as small as teaching it to your spouse or to a friend. So you read it, you think about it, and then you teach it to someone. You apply it in your life. That's the only real way you learn. Quickly the principles. I mean, for me, the way I looked at it was I wanted to read it once, just read it through, think about it a little bit, and then let it settle in my brain. And now I'm looking at it again. I've read it briefly a few times, and some part, because the book has 7 habits, so you can just go for you read each habit one at a time. You don't really have to follow the whole book. There's a lot of science behind it, a lot of research, and so that's how
So
I
you're
approach
saying
it.
like the 7 habits, I don't normally read, so I guess, I don't normally read self-improvement books, and I guess this book kind of falls into that category, right? So my experience with books is, in university, all the stuff that I read, and then after that, it's been mainly, non-scientific related things. And usually books are written in a sequence, right? Like you need to read from A to B. But in this particular case, that's not necessary. That's what you're saying, right?
Not necessarily the truth. I mean, I would read even the first part. It gives you an overview of what's in it. And then if you want to get into more details, then obviously read each chapter on each principle. And I'm going to use principle and habit interchangeably here because they're principles. They're principles. Yeah. Anyway, we'll get into that later. But so they. So I just want to say so this I want to separate this into 3 parts. The first part we will look at basic concepts and ideas that are important to understand where the book is coming from. It's the first part. And the second part, we will then look at the actual habits and discuss how they apply and just look at them. And actually, maybe 2 parts. Let's make it 2 parts. And we can do a kind of reflection of the habits in the end. But so the second part, we'll look at the habits and see how they apply to teaching. I guess intermingled with a bit of how they apply to life. I think that's one way of. That's how we should go. How we will do this.
Okay.
So are you ready? Let's look at some basic concepts.
Let's go. Let's do this thing.
So the first concept is a paradigm, and maybe some people are familiar with this word. I knew what it meant, but I never. I guess when I read the book, I read, okay, I know this word, I understand it. But some people might not have thought about it this way, they think they know what it is, but they haven't thought about what the implications of paradigms and how they can have a very big impact on someone's life.
Well, give us the lowdown. So, from my understanding, a paradigm is a perspective that people would have on a certain piece of their lives, I guess, right? Like it's a way or point from which we look and experience life or whatever, right?
Yeah, but fundamentally, it's a very limited view of life, right? And I'm going to read from the book. So it was originally a scientific term and is more commonly used today to mean a model, theory, perception, assumption, or frame of reference. And in a more general sense, it's the way we see the world, but not in terms of our visual sense of sight. This is an important point. But in terms of perceiving, understanding, and interpreting the world around us. And so a paradigm is something that it's a limited way of looking at the world. Because I've been reading other books that touch on this, and on especially on our ability to perceive things. And it's we're human, so we have limited amount. We can only absorb a limited amount of input, and a lot of the time we are focused on one thing, which basically blocks out everything else, right? So if you're focused in your business, becoming a good teacher, becoming a good parent, we get distracted, obviously. But so the paradigm is a kind of a way we look at the world, and it's in a way very limiting. And so one challenge that this book gives people, is that one needs to challenge our paradigm. One needs to challenge ourselves and figure out what our paradigm is, become aware of it, and learn how to shift. Another key concept that I want to bring up, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
So the paradigm shift. So that's when, one second. Yeah, so that's when we, a paradigm shift, it's according to the book, are can be instantaneous or developmental. Paradigm shifts move us from one way of seeing the world to another, very simply put. And those shifts create a lot of change, which in and of itself is scary. And humans are, it depends, again, and one thing that people need to know is who they are when it comes to personality, and all that. So then you can figure out what kind of person, once you figure out who you are or what kind of person you are, you can better assess if you're more open to a paradigm shift or not.
So
because that's,
yeah. Also, what I would like to chip in before you mentioned, you said before that most people are too focused on one area and they're not able to see beyond it. And I would say that if your focus is scattered amongst a number of things, that can also lead you to anxiety and stress. I know from personal experience. Prior to starting our school, we were kind of toying with the idea of whether to leave Korea or stay and start a business, and that lack of focus, like nothing was really 100% certain. We weren't sure, or me personally, I wasn't sure whether we were leaving. I wasn't sure if we were staying. I wanted to do both at the same time, which is clearly impossible. It's not possible to be here and not be here, right? And so, it just caused a lot of anxiety and like stress for me personally during that time.
Yeah, and that brings me to one point that I would like to make briefly, is how do you shift your paradigm? First of all, you have to figure out why shift and why you should shift and how to shift. The why is in the house, right? So and how to do it. I mean, yeah, it makes people anxious. It's scary. So having a mentor is very helpful. Having a set of principles is very helpful. Again, also reading. If you want to get better at business, if you want to become a business person, read about books. Read books about business. And that will ease you into that shift. Because a lot of shifts, I would say, in life take time. It's not. You don't wake up one day. Most people, I think, don't wake up one day. So they've been teaching for 10, 20 years, and then suddenly I'm going to be a software entrepreneur, right? It doesn't really happen, but you can sow seeds, and those seeds can come from mentors. They can come from books. They can come from the principles that call you towards that change. And I experienced this. I have experienced this. And so anyway, it's hard, it's painful, it makes you anxious, but it's very important to. I think a lot of writers, they say, I forgot how they explain it, but it's they see yourself. And you basically know yourself, know yourself, see yourself, and see. I think in the book it says. I just want to say one more thing, then I'll. But what was it? Seeing is being. So you need to see something to become it. Does that make sense?
I don't know. It depends on how you want to understand it, I think.
Fair enough. So I mean, but you need to know. again, if you want to upgrade yourself, you need to know what's out there. So you need to make that effort and plant those seeds so that then something can grow out of it.
Right.
And you for me, my shift was to, and for me, the shift was from, okay, let's talk about Korea, the E2 visa, working for someone, to working for yourself, and then eventually, hopefully, having a school, right?
Right. So you're talking about right now about the paradigm shift being like you, because I mean, going from teaching or from working for someone and then switching to working for yourself is a huge difference, right? It's a huge shift.
It's a canyon,
right?
At least in most people's mind. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, actually, one thing I was thinking about the other day is on this point. I went from E2, which is working in a school, and that's basically the way I see it. The way my mentors actually pointed out is that your potential, you're only achieving about 30% of your potential, right, money-wise. And so, okay, and at the time, yeah, okay, I'm 20s, whatever. You know, I don't really, I'm happy. And then the next shift was, okay, why don't you go freelance or, you know, right, or try to do something else, like something better paid. But it's still, you hit that ceiling when you're working for someone, regardless. It could be in university, it could be, unless it's a business, but that's different. But if we just stick to the teaching in Korea, so when you work for yourself, that's another one. Then you can get maybe, the next step would be the freelance, right? And that's still you're working for someone, but it's more flexible. You get more money, and so then you maybe get 60-70% of your potential. The next step is working for yourself. And in this case, in Korea, you can do a school, a 공부방, right? Right. Which is F5. Or you can get married or F5. And then, I mean, there's two. In my mind, it took me a long time to reach that point, to be able to shift to that paradigm. But when you get to F5, F6, to work for someone, you have to have a really good reason to do that. Because I understand a lot of people. I felt that I've been on that side, on the other side. I know, but I'm happy and this is fine. I'm fine. Everything's okay. And it is less stress. And there is a caveat, right? It is less stress. You don't have to worry about, unless there's a black swan event like we're going through now. Right. So there's less stress. You just go somewhere. They'll send you here, do this, do that. Okay, fine. But then you're still getting 60 to 70% of your potential worth. You know. So. Yeah, so then you get 100, right? Right. And I'm not even, I don't want to get into tax, because tax is also kind of issue, because I don't know if that's a big issue. Yeah, I wonder, I mean, it's, how do you judge a potential of a person's income? I don't know how you'd go about saying, you know, I'm at 30% of my income potential. How do you figure out what is 100% of an income? So think about it like this. If you're working in a Hagwon, which is a school in Korea, you get about, they say it's 20 an hour, but it's not, because you have to stay there 8 hours. So you have to split the hours and the time to get there. So you split it up, it's like maybe $10 an hour. Maybe, I don't know, 8. It's not that, I mean, it is a lot for that stage in your life, but no. Then when you work freelance, they give you a bigger cut. But then again, that's why the paradigm shift is hard, and that's why knowing your who you are and your your temperament, because that's, you know, there's study, the big 5. I looked this up. I forgot to look up what they were again. But so the big 5. Read about the big 5. Figure out. You can take a test online. It's free, and you can figure out who you are in terms of temperament. So when you get to that point that you have to be freelance, you got to negotiate more. Okay. Right? You got to, you know, I'm a tool. You're going to use me, but I want a good deal, because time is money. Right. but then so you can negotiate more. And from my experience, it's just better. Then you'll get so. How do you? Why did I say you can? You make more money basically. So if they and I mean we're talking about different jobs, right? One is a school, another one you go to like a government place, or you teach adults, or you teach business people, CEOs. They're different jobs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you get paid a lot more by the hour, and they get a lot more by the hour. So you end up getting more of a cut, let's say,
right,
per hour. And that's what I mean by potential. When you work for yourself, it's 100% maximization,
mm-hmm.
where you get all the money. Basically, you get the money directly from the consumer, from the
right.
There's no middleman, basically.
Right.
And then when you go to the Hagwon level, you multiply. Then you go you 2x, you 3x, whatever. But a key thing in here is knowing your temperament, knowing are you agreeable, are you disagreeable? But disagreeable is better for business. Being disagreeable, conscious.
Mm-hmm.
Conscious. I think conscious is another one. So knowing that, because if you're an agreeable person, you're not going to be good at negotiating, and then you're going to be not taken for a ride, but I mean, just you won't be able to negotiate as well as a person who's disagreeable,
mm-hmm.
and you'll get a worse deal.
Right.
And the higher you go, the more that's worth being able to negotiate. Right? When you're in E2 visa, you get $100 raise maybe. I mean, I've heard teachers tell me, I get this big share all the secrets. No, I've heard teachers say to me, "Oh man, I've been working in this Hagwon 2-3 years, and man, if I get $100, I'll stay here more." I'm like, okay, that's what makes it fine. I mean, when you're, yes, it's okay, good for you. But that's it's the different paradigms, and paradigms limit you, as I said from the beginning.
Sure. Well, it's comfort and security versus discomfort and insecurity. I guess the exact opposite, right? Like, I mean, during just take the whole Corona situation presently. While our businesses were closed and we were struggling to cope with the situation of basically not having money coming in and running out on funds, I kept seeing posts from people who were saying, I'm going back to work. I'm going to start teaching online. I'm going to be getting paid. And so that's from people who are employed by, universities or whatever other places that don't necessarily have to shut down during this type of scenario, right? So a lot of people, I think, find that a lot more comfortable, knowing that even though things go south, you're kind of not left out to dry. You're not on your own, and there is somebody who basically supports you, right? Who you rely on for an income. You don't have to rely on yourself, which makes things a lot easier. It's one less things to worry about, so to speak.
I understand. Again, it also comes down to temperament. How much risk are you willing to take on?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's what I mean. Like how much risk you're willing to take. That's what I was saying. So if you're more comfortable, you don't want to risk. You don't want to have to worry about, oh my God, I have to close down my business because of a proposed pandemic is taking place. Versus, instead of teaching or working from my business, I now have to work from home. I still get paid. The situation is a little bit different. The scenario is a bit different, but in terms of an income, nothing's much changed. So, yeah.
Yeah. So that's a conversation in and of itself. So I'll just move on to the next concept, which is principles. So what are principles? And the title of this book is 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So effectiveness, right? How can we become more effective in our life? So a principle. So hold on. Yeah. So I mean, yes. So sorry. Yeah, being is seen in the human dimension. Okay. So principles. So the basis of these principles are so they're natural laws in the human dimension that are just as real, just as unchanging and unarguably there as laws such as gravity in the physical dimension. I don't think that was what I wanted to read. Okay, anyway, but so principles are things that, oh, 1 second. Sorry. There we go. Okay, sorry, my mistake. Well, what's going on? Principles are guidelines for human conduct that are proven to have enduring, permanent value. Okay? And yeah, so they're things that don't really change. We haven't talked about the principles yet, but they're things that if we do them, if you follow them, they will have positive outcomes. There can be negative outcomes, obviously, but one thing the book says is if we took the opposite course, like so let's say the first principle is being proactive. If we are not proactive, most likely we will not get good outcomes or as good outcomes. Right? If you decide to just again, but you were talking about the risk of changing jobs, and how this black swan event has affected that. Well, I mean, if you're working for someone in a Hagwon and there's a problem with a Hagwon, that's out of your control, right? That's the example of how not being proactive, how in the sense that you made a decision to just kind of, okay, I'm happy here. I'm not going to take actions toward, I guess, moving out of it or progressing. Then yeah, that's the opposite, right? You're not being proactive. You're just sitting there and doing what you have to do. And fair enough, that's a choice. But then, yeah, so doing the opposite of these principles will be less effective.
Right.
That's the point I'm making. Okay, and another important concept to keep in mind is the concept of so habits. What is a habit? Again, the title of this book is The 7 Habits, so it's a key word. And this is a very interesting definition. A habit is the intersection of knowledge, skill, and desire. So knowledge is a theoretical paradigm, the what to do and the why. Skill is the how to do, and desire is the motivation, the want to do. In order to make something a habit in our lives, we have to have all three. Okay, so let's look at that again. Knowledge, what to do and why. Skill, how to do it. Desire, want to do it. So this is very important. And I mean, just generally speaking, creating good habits is hard. It takes that first step, but there's a metaphor where a good habit is like, or trying to create a good habit is like, so you stick to a good habit, and over time, like strands, they wrap themselves around, and they get stronger and stronger, and then eventually it becomes unbreakable. But that's not 100%, right? You can always break a good habit, but bad habits are easy to have, to acquire, and difficult to break. That's the other side of the coin. Hey, habits. But it's very interesting way of putting it. I'm sorry. Excuse me, Julie, please.
Yeah, all these things they seem pretty intuitive. I mean,
please go outside. Please.
In order to develop whatever it is that you want to do, a habit, I guess, since that's what we're talking about.
Sorry,
you need to know what it is that you're doing, right? You need to want to do it. And what was the third one?
So the third one is want to do it. I think it's the second one you're missing.
How to do it. Yeah. Okay. Right. Well, because I mean, if you, I guess if you wanted to talk about something simple like driving a car, right? If you don't know how to drive a car, then you can't develop a habit of taking that car to work on a regular basis, right? You'd be down to cruising on a bike, which is great. You've been doing it. I can't believe you've been putting in 100 kilometers on your bike rides, man.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, that's a good point. But this is a key concept. And another concept that he brings up is the maturity continuum. And basically, he splits up so what does this mean? As human beings, we have different stages in our lives. The first one being the dependence stage, right? We depend on our parents. We depend on I guess we could talk about depending on our bosses, depending on the people around us sometimes. And there are different levels of independence, dependence. And the book talks a lot about this, and it brings up very interesting examples of, it's very interesting. I highly recommend reading that part. But we want to move away from dependence, right? Generally speaking, when we're teenagers, we don't want to stay home, playing video games. That's what they didn't say. We want to move away from that.
From dependence.
To become independent, to become self-sufficient. And the next step, according to the book, is interdependence, and that's a higher level. And also he splits up some of the principles into so he splits the principles into basically 3 parts. The first 3: be proactive, begin with the end in mind, and put first things first. These 3 are related to independence. Okay, so once you become independent, you can start applying these. And it also makes it makes the point that if you haven't achieved independence and you try to do these things, it makes it harder. And it just makes it harder. You will never. I mean, again, you can always think of examples. I don't want to get into that, but that's what it says, what the book says. And the second part is interdependence. And here we have 3 principles: think win-win, seek first to understand, then to be understood, and synergize. And these 3 principles we will apply them when we are dealing with other people. Hence interdependence. So the most effective way to live life is not just to be independent. You could live in the woods and survive. There's some survivalists that can do that, but most people need other people to progress. You need mentors. You need people to talk to. You need someone you trust. That's something really hard to find. That will allow you to progress as an individual on many levels, in business, in your education, etc. So this is very interesting and very fundamental to understand this book. And so moving on, another important...
Well, before we move on, how can we apply what we just talked about to teaching? Because you've been summarizing the book basically, but we haven't really touched on how these principles and these ideas can be applied to teaching, or how they do apply to teaching, right?
I'd like to just say one more, and then we can go to the principles and do that. Okay, just one more. So this is the paradigm of effectiveness, a PPC balance, or P means production, PC means production capacity. And think of the story of the goose and the golden egg. In that story, the farmer has a goose, the PC, the producer, and at some point he wants so much gold, he's so greedy that he kills the PC and ends up with nothing. or less than you would have had. So, and this is, a lot of people don't, I think, neglect this part. Like for example, they don't invest in themselves in terms of education or in learning skills, networking, so things that can help you progress. And again, plant those seeds that will allow you to paradigm shift later on, right? So so this is very important as well. Again, it goes into more detail in the book, but yeah, this is important. So production, the PPC balance, production and production capacity, your ability to produce. If you don't invest in that, eventually, one of my mentors for years, he said, Bruno, why don't you work for yourself? Bruno, why don't you, be your own boss, et cetera,
right?
And invest in yourself, And I'm like, yeah, but I don't really need to, because I just got to teach. I'm teaching, and I wasn't investing in the PC part, production capacity, and I got the production that that comes with not doing that, but in the past anyway. So yeah, this is important to talk about. Anyway, yeah. So that's it. Now let's move on to the second part. Now let's cover the actual principles, and let's try to figure out or try to explain how they can apply to teaching. And
let's do that.
So the first one is called private victory. As I said, it's the first three principles are private victory. And the first one, they're related to your to becoming independent. So it's about you. The first one is be proactive. Okay, we already touched on this. I already said something about it. Would you like to bring something up?
On how to be proactive?
Yes,
Act on things rather than waiting for things to happen to you, right?
Yeah. Just do it.
So I guess in terms of teaching, well, that's pretty simple. As a teacher, you should be acting on things, right? But I mean, it wouldn't necessarily always be applicable. There may most certainly are circumstances during which you should be more on the receiving side of things, right? Like I don't know, I'm thinking about of a case where teachers provide students with a question and they immediately provide them with an answer rather than waiting for the students to come up with their answer on their own type of deal. I remember distinctly that very thing, that this occurred in a classroom, even early on in my ESL teaching career, and I saw an experienced teacher of 20 years of teaching experience do exactly that, and it literally blew my mind that she was too ahead without really allowing the students to do some of their own mental work in order to produce what was required of them. So in that case, I think proactivity kind of worked against her in that particular case.
Too much, yeah.
And I could see how that would be damaging. But I mean, for the most part, I guess when it comes to lesson prep or as a teacher, I guess from an employer's perspective, I would say, teachers who are proactive prove to be a lot more beneficial to a business than teachers who are reactive, right? And do what they are told to do rather than, as compared to the teachers who just do things out of their own volition, out of their own initiative, right? And I think that'll reflect in your classroom as well. Because if you're a teacher who's on the ball, then you can prepare things, you know what's going on, you know how to handle your classroom, versus a teacher who is constantly being told on how to handle their classroom, suggesting that possibly the classroom is not being run very well, right?
Yeah, I mean, so being reactive. Yeah, I mean, but a lot of the teachers I met initially at the beginning, they were reactive or just didn't. I'm talking more about teaching in general, like teaching. But yeah, they were reactive or didn't. I guess the the end of that spectrum, like the not wanting to do anything really.
Sure.
And that was So so that there is that side to it, but but I mean, proactive for me is of course in a business. Let's say you're a teacher in a school, going beyond. Yeah, I mean, in the past we've talked about this. So a lot of teachers, they just show up, and a lot of teachers do start off well, like they're motivated and they want to do things and help. And I don't like generalizing, but this is from my experience. Okay, this is so they start off. Oh, I'm gonna help out and figure out new ways to teach, etc. Until they start working 40, 50 hours a week. Oh, not 40, 50 hours, but I mean working until they start doing the actual work, which is, Hagwon is kind of a little bit mind-numbing, depends, obviously. But it gets to a point where, you just want to do it. Yeah. And then that part of your brain that was thinking, oh, I'm going to make this super exciting for everyone. It's like, well, I'm tired.
Yeah, right.
And I want to have dinner.
I just want to get through the day.
I want to meet my friends, and that's, it's understandable.
Sure, but, and I guess that's the problem with like incentives. A lot of it has to do with monetary incentives and benefits and all that stuff, right? So
they're from my experience, there are Hagwon, there are no monetary incentives. Yeah. I've had this conversation with myself and with my wife.
I think, but very few and very limited, because it's a very kind of limiting business, so to speak. I mean, if you go working at a retail store, how much expansion can you get? Personal growth. I've worked at a bunch of retail stores, and there's always a limit cap. Even managers make peanuts, really, compared to, and it just depends on, I don't know, that's pay scale or whatever. But in terms of Hagwons, there is a limit to how much. There is a trade-off to the income versus the expenses, right? From a business perspective. So.
And from a teacher's perspective, like even in the universities, I remember talking to a lot of the guys I knew, and they had these expectations. Oh, I'm going to work here for a certain amount of time, blah blah blah, and then eventually I'll go up the ladder. But there's a glass
ceiling. Yeah, at the university here, there's a glass ceiling.
Yep.
The only way to go is to reach the highest level, which means getting a PhD. At which time you probably stop working at teaching English here at Korean universities, and you actually start doing some actual academic work, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but with an MA here in Korea, even that's there is a glass ceiling, and the glass ceiling the level of the glass ceiling will depend on which area of the country you work in, because the pays vary. If you're working in like Gangwon-do, near closer to Seoul, then your basic pay will be a lot higher than it would be here. And universities may require you to do this, to do that. You have to do research, but your pay raises will not increase dramatically. And if they do, then from what I understand, universities take care of that and basically eliminate the players that begin to reach certain level of.
That's what I heard.
Yeah.
Maybe this. Yeah. It's about the seniority thing, but I mean it's the environment you're in, and you got to work with it. I mean,
sure.
That's it. That's why you take steps to be proactive.
Right.
You're proactive. Right. You look ahead. And this one, okay, this was a good, oh my goodness, what is the name of that machine? The segue. It's a good segue to the next principle, which is begin with the end in mind.
Okay.
And where do you want to be after you've taught for 10, 20 years? Mm-hmm. Do you want to be still in a Hagwon? I've met people like that. I don't know if they went back and came back. I don't know what happened. I just saw 50, maybe at least 50-year-olds still teaching Hagwon. Maybe they had a freelance job and they're getting lots of money. Okay, maybe. Yeah, I don't know. I just an old guy actually. Actually, few old guys doing that. And I was like, so yeah. So this is why these principles matter. And if you imagine a lot of mentors, when I say mentors, I mean like people online who talk about mentoring and all this. They all say, look, you got to have a crazy dream, like a word. So make a crazy dream, make $1 million, become the top researcher or whatever. Aim for that, and have a goal. And then if you just go with it, you're not proactive. I mean, yeah, you're not the outcome will definitely not be as good as it could be. Again, I mean, definitely, there's no definitely in life, but it would be nice. You know, there's always chance. There's always you win the lottery or you invest in something like now. Let me sidetrack a bit. You know, I've known.
Wait a second. You just said invest in a lottery. That's okay.
Some people do. Some people have that.
Well, let's clarify the areas. Lottery is not an investment, right?
No. Some people win the lottery. That's how I was saying. Chance, right? And some people invest money in other things and they make money.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah? So, I mean, but in this situation we're in now, this is when people, if you get it at the right time, everything's stocks-wise and it's all down, right? If you get the right one, that's when they usually very rich.
That's all gambling, right? It is gambling because even an educated guess, unless you have some inside information, even an educated guess will basically leave you hanging. For the most part, stock companies make money because they invest on a large scale. An individual investor does not make millions, right? Very rarely are there individual investors who make it big. For the most part, the big numbers are scooped up by large companies who have a very broad portfolio and, you know, like freaking hallways full of people sitting on computers and analyzing stuff 24/7.
Yeah.
It's never an individual. So, you know, I don't know. I always think stocks, whether it's stocks or whether it's Bitcoin, it's always a gamble. It's the same as going and, you know, playing roulette at a casino. You may be analyze the statistics and probabilities and stuff, but it's all probabilities. You know, that's if you're lucky, you win and you go home happy. But for the most part, I think most people don't.
So, and back to the point, like if you don't have an end in mind, that's what you're doing, in my view.
Well, that's the whole idea of a goal, right? And it seems like, you know, right now that you're talking about it, I find that a lot of I think you may have brought that point up as well. A lot of the, what do you call these fellas? Who basically, you know, encourage us to do better, to grow as individuals.
You mean motivation?
Yeah, the motivational speakers. You know, they have a very similar line that they sell, and really, it's quite, it's very intuitive when you think about it. Like a few years ago, I was you know reading up on that, and I was doing a lot of kind of meditative reading and studying in order to keep my sanity while I was doing my MA. And when I hear all the stuff the motivational speakers talk, and even what the 7 habits of the highly effective people present, I've come across all of that in a very different, well, not a very, in a different form, presented differently, but basically the principle is the same, you know. Have a goal in mind. Like this, the stupid example I always give, and I think you've given one as well, or I don't know, I was talking to somebody else just recently and they gave me another one. But the example I always give is, you know, if you've never played darts and you throw one dart, chances of you hitting a bullseye are very slim. But if I give you 1,000 darts and you start throwing blindly, you're bound to hit a bullseye. So if you have a goal in mind and you continue to pursue that goal, you're bound to get to it. And I guess the point is to narrow your focus, right? Which kind of goes against what you were saying initially. Or I don't know if it goes against it, but
it depends, right? I mean, I think you're referring to the paradigm that it's limiting. But
yeah,
I mean,
right.
if you're going the right way, right? If you're aiming at the right thing, then your aim, and I think I mentioned it a few times, you should aim at changing the paradigm. Not now, but later. Mm-hmm. Do things now that will help you change the paradigm. So if you aim at it, then you can, of course, you're going to shut out other things, but that's your aim.
Yeah. So you have your aim, and you're firing away in that direction, whether you hit that aim or not. And it sometimes may seem like you're not even aiming at that, right? But whatever your goal is, and if you know that whatever you do is kind of in pursuit of that goal, then eventually you should, the probability of you getting to that goal is a lot better than if you were just shooting blindly, I guess, right?
Yeah, and if you don't mind, we can move on to the next one, the third one, which is put first things first. And here, so basically prioritize the things that matter. And a lot of the time, we don't do that. And we kind of do what, of course, I mean, we want to relax. We want to watch TV. We want to read books. Nowadays, we have very big distractions like smartphones, etc. But I would argue that nowadays it's much harder for people to put first things first, and in the sense that we should be developing ourselves, even though you don't feel like it. So it doesn't matter how you feel, but just developing yourself. A lot of old people in antiquity said, know yourself, develop yourself, read, find people, like-minded people who have similar goals, etc. So prioritizing the things that will maximize your effectiveness is important.
Sure.
And if you're stuck in a paradigm, you won't do that. And so the question is, how do you get out of that? How do you wake up? How do you start seeing what you should be seeing? And that's a big question, something everyone should ask themselves. What do I see, and what am I not seeing? And or if you can answer it, that question you should think, what should I be seeing? So that's one. That's what I'd like to say about that. But yeah, no, prioritizing what matters is important.
Yeah. So I think to what you were just saying, as teachers, one of my friend is an Android programmer, and he's getting on with age. He's a smart guy, and he's done a lot of work. But basically, he said that because technology moves so quickly, and I've heard that from other programmers as well, somewhere, one way or another. It's very hard to keep up with all the new technology or all the new, programming languages that are coming out, because every year, like, you'll learn the newest programming language or the newest additions to the programming language. Within a year, there's something new coming up. And if you don't keep on top of things, you will fall behind. And it's the same in teaching. If you become complacent and I guess lazy in a sense, and you don't, educate yourself, or if you fall into a routine and you continue in that routine, you will miss out on a lot of things. And I think that's one of those traps that I think a lot of Hagwon owners or business owners may fall under. If you take on too many responsibilities, and your attention is divided, you become a lot, or maybe somewhat inefficient at certain areas, you know, rather than being fully efficient in one. Kind of like the old saying says, sorry?
The areas that matter.
Yeah, kind of like the saying says, you know, what is it? Jack of all trades, master of none, right? But then there's also stereotypes against academics who are experts in a certain area but are completely inept in other areas of life, you know. Noam Chomsky is a perfect example of that. Like the man, I don't know, last video podcast I saw, well not podcast, a video I saw, an interview I saw with him, his voice is so weak. I don't know, he's got to be nearing 100 years, man. He's an old man, right? And he spent his entire life cooped up at the university, at the MIT University, in his, you know, in his office. And I remember reading somewhere one time he made a comment saying that, you know, for the work that he did, for the sacrifices that he did for his academics, he basically sacrificed a lot of things in real life. You know, like his life is very different to most people. He doesn't, I don't know. First of all, he had to sacrifice on seeing his family. And I bet he doesn't have a lot of the same ideas on just regular daily lives, you know? Like, you know, so...
Yeah, I don't want to talk too much about him. I watched an interview, and yeah, he seemed like, yeah, I mean, he knows a lot, but he doesn't, I don't know, he speaks, he mumbles a lot. And
well, because it's like he mumbles because he's an old man, man. Like his voice is probably leaving.
Fair,
Like I'm
fair.
40, what am I to 45? I've taught all day and my voice is croaky like a goddamn croak right now. So,
Yeah, but I mean,
you know.
yeah, I mean, there's, yeah, that's, anyway, yeah, fair enough. It's, yeah.
Yeah, but the point being, you know, there's sides to all coins, and I don't know. I think to be good at stuff, you need to learn how to balance. I don't think that there's never one answer for everything. You know, it's just like you can't teach all children the same way because not everybody responds in the same way. So. You know, there's occasions where you kind of have to choose your battles, right? You stick to one paradigm, you focus on one thing, but then you need to know when to make the switch and divide your focus amongst others, right? Other things.
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah, and choose. Yeah, deciding what is important. That's hard as well.
Yeah, yeah, and that may differ, right, based on the timing.
Yeah. Okay, that's number 3. Put first things first. I mean, I'd like to add something. Like from personal experience, like recently, I've been trying to balance semi-work life with exercise and reading.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing that I noticed was, like, certain books you want to read because they're interesting. Certain books you want to read because you want to learn something.
Mm-hmm.
And some books, they're just hard. You really want to read them. You're going to learn from them, but they're just, they read them and it's like, you know, you read it and you read it again and you read it again. So, and this is not a hard book. I wouldn't say it's a very hard book to understand, but it takes time to digest. But yeah, so books that I want to read. I have been reading some. So yeah, so because my point is that you start reading them, and then okay, it's interesting, but I'm tired, and I want to relax. And I'm reading these days. I'm reading. I don't know if you've heard of Salvatore. He wrote the Drizzt novels. It's a fantasy novel.
Don't know Salvatore. Maybe I used to read a lot of fantasy books back in the day.
Do you know Dungeons and Dragons?
I'm familiar with the title, but never really read the books. Yeah.
That world, it's fantastic. Anyway, so I'm reading it, and it's great. I'll read it, and it's got a bit of philosophy, a bit of meaning of life, etc., etc. And so I'd much rather read that. I can just read that. Even if I'm tired, I'll just read it.
Right.
But then the other books, it's hard. It takes effort, and my brain just like, look, I'm tired. I don't want to do it. But I noticed these days that I've been trying to do it for a while. And today I was reading one, and I was like, my brain wasn't complaining. So I was like, what changed? So making the decision to do something hard ahead of time will give you the energy later on.
Mm-hmm.
My point. Something that felt hard and required effort, suddenly you're not complaining. And that's basically you're creating a good habit. I guess you could call it a good intellectual habit. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so that was very interesting. A few days ago, I felt that I didn't complain. So I like to see myself, right? And I was like, oh, that's interesting. But it's a lesson. It's something the younger people can learn. That even though even writing, one of my goals has, and I guess it still is, to write a paper.
Right.
I'm completely outside that track. I'm in the prairie with the buffaloes right now. But but no, it's something I'd like to do. Just even for not fun is not the right word, but just writing it and reading about it. I've done it before a long time ago. But so reading about a topic and just writing about it, that'd be great. And that sounds impossible to me, but a few years ago I said I'm going to do it, and I'm once in a while I realize, I want to write about this, and then I write notes and whatever. So these hard things, your mind remembers.
Yeah.
But you have to decide, you have to make that decision, write it down.
You also need to set aside some time to it. You got to keep in mind that as adults, we're not university students, and our time gets eaten up by the plethora of things that we have to do on a daily basis. But there's only so much time in a day. And so if you've got a full schedule and you're looking at squeezing something else into it, you've got to eliminate one or two things in order to make room for that, right?
That's why I put first things first. Yeah. Train your brain to do that.
Sometimes occasionally it's, I think our ambitions get ahead of ourselves or themselves. And, we try to accomplish more than we're actually physically capable of doing or mentally capable of doing. Heck, there's a bunch of stuff I would like to eliminate from my life right now and replace that with, a bunch of other stuff. And one of the main ones is work. That takes up a huge part of my life right now. So if I want to read, academic books, or if I want to spend more time with my kids, or if I want to, I'd like to go on a bike ride or go to the gym or just do anything else, that's overshadowed by the amount of time I spend, commit to my work. And so I think it's for most adults like that.
I agree. But then, we had this conversation before. We don't have to talk about it, but just before the video. So, you make sacrifices now so that you can do that later.
No, I know. I get that. But it's not always possible to make those sacrifices. That's what I mean. Like, how do you sacrifice on work? Unless you're planning on switching your entire life. Let's say if you were in a job that you hate, switching it means I've heard of people who do it. I've heard people leaving Korea and having worked here as an ESL teacher for the past 10, 15 years. They're moving back home now and they're starting up a completely new career. That's tough.
Great.
That is very brave. And I think most people are not really able to do that, right? Because that is a huge shift in paradigms right there.
If anyone's watching this and thinking about that, after this video, sit down, write down your plan, because if you just go, I've heard a lot of I was gonna say horror stories. But in the sense that they lost a bunch of money. Sorry, that's betting. A lot of money, and they have nothing to show for it.
Yeah.
In terms of, because usually it's because of the kids, right? Education.
Yeah, sure. Because I
It's
mean,
like,
there's always a learning curve to everything, right? There's a huge learning curve to being an ESL teacher and moving along. And by the end of 10 years, you've reached a certain point of efficiency that you never had initially, right? And so it goes with everything else. When you start a new career, a new path, you have to go through the same learning curve, and you will lose money along the way, and you will go through hardships. But I think when we've been doing something for 10 years, for a decade, you've mostly forgotten all the things that you had to deal with, all the hardships that you had to go through, and so people kind of go, "Oh yeah, I can just do the new thing right then and there," which is not necessarily true.
but,
Not
one
impossible,
thing,
but
it's not impossible, but one thing, sorry to interrupt you.
no.
One thing that I didn't do it myself, but people at the beginning of their adventure in Korea and in teaching English in the world, I guess it's more for Asia because you can make money and save money.
Mm-hmm.
You think, but when you're here as a teacher, you have a lot of time. You have an hour a day or two to read.
Sure.
Invest in a skill. You have that.
Yeah.
But most people, I would say again, generalizing, some people just don't do it. And I've been thinking about this because I've heard a lot of stories. People go back suddenly and for a real reason. Oh, my parents are ill, or some real world that you can't run away from it reason, or you can't not do it reason. And so they go, but then they don't have anything to fall down on. Fall down, is that very
Fall back on.
Fall back on. Okay, I killed that one.
Yeah, but that's.
But you see what I mean? So getting ready to do that. If you want to do that, start now. Think now. Get the skills. But yeah, it's really hard. It's really hard.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's always more efficient to, when you. Yeah, like you said, like if you're a young person and you're coming to Asia to for a year or two, you want to make some money, then take the additional time to work up some skills. Like right now, I admin a Facebook group with a couple of fellas who are teaching here. One of them is studying here. The other one teaches here, but both of them have online businesses that they work on in their spare time, affiliate online businesses, and they're doing quite well. Like from what I see that they're doing, they do receive a lot of benefits, economic benefits. Like I don't know if a lot, but they do get benefits, economic benefits from that. And they're working, they're building their kind of online presence. So if ever, I guess, they decide to quit whatever it is that they're doing right now, teaching here in South Korea or studying, then they do have something else to fall back on. And they will be able to devote a lot more time to develop that part of, the business.
Yeah. No, yeah, okay. So I keep mixing up idioms. But that's good. Good for them. Good for them. Taking the initiative and having an end in mind is like that. It's fantastic.
Yeah, but if it comes to like a major shift in paradigm, I don't know if you've been teaching, for example, English for the past decade. I think, teaching or doing anything else for 10 years. I would think that rather than shifting your paradigm, I would be looking at expanding what I already have and building up on that, the skills and the knowledge that I've gathered over the past 10 years and building on that and expanding it in some way. Still being in the same realm, still having the same paradigm, but expanding its vision or maybe narrowing it down. However, you know what I mean? Like I wouldn't.
I agree.
I wouldn't stop being. I wouldn't stop working in the world of teaching. Maybe I would choose to stop, which I think a lot of people do. A lot of expats teaching abroad do. They stop working in the ESL world and move on to the actual world of teaching, right? And once you get in there, you can continue working on your, expand on your expertise and go on to becoming academic in the educational fields, right? Something of
Oh yeah,
that sort. But I mean, I would not choose to start completely over, and shift to a completely different area. Because man, I wouldn't want to do everything from zero again, honestly, you know?
But yeah, but I mean, let's move on. Let's move on to the next one, part 2. So the second part is very interesting, and it introduced me to a very interesting concept.
How many parts do we have left?
So we did the first part, which is about you, and the second part is about interdependence. So principles that allow you to effectively interact with other people.
Okay, because it's already 11:15, so we've been here for like an hour and 15 minutes.
Okay, I just talk about this one. So I'll talk about this one, and we'll go to the principles. But it's very interesting. This concept called emotional bank account. I don't know how many people have thought about this like this, but have you heard this before?
No, emotional bank account? Not really. I can imagine what it is, but I've never heard of it. No.
It's very intuitive. You may use that before. So basically, it's like when you're dealing with someone, you're giving and taking. Basically, that's it. That's what it means, right? And this is very, I was talking to my friend the other day about like with my wife, like if I want to do something, I'm not gonna get into details. I don't want to start a fight, but if I want to do something, I gotta do a lot of things, small things, big things, and it kind of adds up until it gets to the point where, can I do this? Okay, and that kind of you build it up, right? And so and it talks about there are 6 major deposits, so 6 kinds of deposits. This is very interesting. Number 1, understanding the individual. So this applies to a relationship, any kind of relationship, business relationship, married, your spouse, etc. So number 1, understanding the individual. Number 2, attending to the little things. Number 3, keeping commitments. This is a big one. Number 4, clarifying expectations. I would argue this is one of the biggest ones here. Number 5, showing personal integrity. And number 6, apologizing sincerely when you make a withdrawal. So this is like, yeah, I mean, I recommend people to read about it and how he explains everything in detail. But number 4, clarifying expectations. When it comes to dealing with people, this is very important, and it's something that personally I need to work on, because sometimes we start a relationship with someone and we make assumptions, and we know what the mother that is. So yeah, expectations. And this applies to your customers if you're in a business, right? You want to let them know what to expect. And also for teaching, right? So you're teaching, what are you teaching? And how are you assessing? What's the end product? What are your expectations? What do you expect from the students? What do the parents expect from you, etc.? So that's very important. Anyway, so moving on, I just want to put that. That's very interesting. So it's cool. Again, this book has a lot of interesting concepts and ideas that are worth reading about. So let's move on to. So this is the second part, the public victory, right? Dealing with people, with society. The first principle is think win-win. And in the book, it goes into like the different variants. So there's win-win, win-lose, lose-win, and lose-lose. And you'd be surprised at how many people are lose-lose. And usually a trait that is associated with that is agreeableness. Too much agreeableness, and you're going to end up in that quadrant. You actually made a kind of graph. There's a picture, and it shows you the different kinds of win-win, win-lose-win, win-lose, lose-lose, and it explains what kind of person it is, and what can result from that. And and thinking win-win is actually quite hard, because I would say most people think win-lose. Right? I win, you lose. Fewer people think I lose, you win. Even fewer people think I lose, you lose. Okay. So I know, hold on, no, maybe there are more people who think like that. I don't know. I guess that's the easy way. One easy way out. But we all lose. We all go down with the ship. Um, but yeah, but thinking win-win is how can we work? How can we work together to maximize our effectiveness, our potential, our relationship, and yeah, I mean, and I mean, if you look at the Hagwon industry and even teaching, there's a lot of fear. Like people, when they're working for themselves, I mean, not for the not for the teachers working in schools, but people who have their own business, they're worried about talking about what they do, right? Because there's worry, and so they're not thinking win-win, and they're people that in the group we're in that they think win-win, and that's great. That's inspiring for me. I don't know if you can say names, but it's really inspiring because we're competitors, but not really. I mean, if you just think about the size of the market, you can't. It's impossible for foreigners, the few foreigners that exist that are in Korea, to. I mean, you're competing against each other, but that's usually because maybe you're a little bit better than I'm a little bit better than him or her or whatever. But it's not like we're not gonna steal all the students from someone, right? That's highly unlikely. So, but it's natural, the fear that you say something and then someone steals the idea and then I lose all my students. It's not valid. It's not valid, I think. So, but thinking win-win, working not again. How far are you willing to go with that? Right, working together, maybe not, but sharing some information that will maybe make the quality. I don't know. This is a topic in and of itself, a conversation in and of itself. What do you think about this win-win principle? Think win-win from your experience.
Is it difficult?
Do you think like that? I mean, if you think like that, you got to teach me.
Well, I mean, when it comes to running a business or
yeah, in whatever, in general.
I guess win-win would be the best, right? Because I mean, customers come to you, they have certain demands that you should follow, and if you do that, then you get rewarded. It's a win-win situation. You give something, they give something. If it's one side demanding and the other one giving, then that's a problematic relationship. I guess, a lose-win from whatever perspective is not a good place to be if you're on the losing side, right? If it's a relationship, if it's a business relationship, if it's like a student-teacher relationship, sacrifices that are not repaid may not necessarily be very comfortable to live with later on, right? Whether it's for personal reasons or professional reasons. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking, and I just remembered that in the book it talks about that it says that to be, what was it? Usually people who think win-win, they're very confident, self-confident, because they know that regardless, and I forgot, they're independent, I guess, but regardless of what happens to them, they will figure out a way. So they have that kind of confidence, so they will be able to give more energy and to help more people. I think I'm thinking more in terms of helping other teachers in our.
Yeah, but that's kind of a prisoner's dilemma, right? Are you familiar with the prisoner's dilemma?
Can you?
Yeah, I don't remember it exactly 100%, but it's basically, there are two prisoners, and there are 4 different scenarios. The police interrogate the bank robbers. If one of the bank robbers snitches on their friend, then he gets to go free. His friend is booked. If it's the other way around, then obviously if he doesn't snitch but his friend snitches, then he gets booked but his friend goes free. If both of them snitch on each other, then both of them go stay in for a long time. If neither one of them says anything, then both of them go free, kind of thing. But you never know what the other side will do, you know. So, and maybe this is just my personal kind of mistrust in human nature, but I no longer place blind, naive trust into people that I meet. I used to once upon a time, but I've been disappointed so many times that whenever I conduct myself with individuals on any level, whether it's personal or business, I never give 100% of myself to them because I don't know what the other prisoner will do, so to speak. It's different in a classroom setting. You know, I try to give 100% of myself because I'm dealing with children. But when it comes to dealing with adults, it's a very different situation. So I think when it comes to teaching, as a teacher, being in a lose-win situation, and again, this is a teacher-student relationship, not a teacher-employer relationship, because that's a different situation, you know, that's a different dynamic. But as a teacher, I think if you're on the losing end, even the losing end may be a winning, you know, like if you are a teacher and you sacrifice and you put in the time and the work to get your students up to speed, you know, and you're losing sleep maybe and you're losing time and your students are succeeding and you're putting all that effort into the students, maybe for you the winning is the part where students actually do good because of all your success, right? So even though you invested all the time and effort, which would be the losing part, right? But in the end, if the results are great, then I think you're on the winning side, right? Again, like I said, it would be very different when it comes to teacher-employer, obviously, right? You don't want to be, as a teacher, like you don't want to be putting in all your work, all your time to, you know, to an employer, for an employer who, you know, will either not pay you the promised amount or you know, stiff you on some additional things and cut corners here and there and pay you less than they were supposed to, you know. So yeah, so this I think like a lose-win may be okay in a teacher-student relationship, but again may not always apply. I don't know.
Yeah, this is one I have to think about, and this is one I struggle with at times. Because again, it depends on the relationship you're talking about. Yeah. Okay, let's move on to the next one, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Seek first to understand, then to be understood. And my understanding of this is that one needs to listen.
Sure.
Because people always have something new to tell to you. You can always learn something new from people. But it's hard sometimes. Because
we're adults and everybody always wants to be right. I think, I remember who, but somebody said adults no longer have conversations. We have forgotten how to talk. We argue. You know, and I think that's kind of what this principle is about.
That's a very interesting way of putting it. I'm reading another book, recently, the 12 Rules for Life. And it talks about this. Like one of the rules is I listen to the person because you can learn something from them or something. And it's related to this. And I'll listen to the person you're talking to because you can learn something from them. So this is that's and I think he said something on those lines. We don't have conversations. We argue, or we want to get our way.
Yeah, exactly. Like we're always trying to persuade the other person that what we're saying is correct and what they're saying may not be, or whatever. Like we're always trying to bring people on our side, which is not a conversation. It's like it's a form of an argument, whether it's an aggressive one or a passive one, but it's still, I guess, passive aggressive, if you want to label it, right?
And he also makes a distinction between giving advice and a conversation. So a lot of the times we're giving advice.
Right.
We're not listening. We're just saying, "Oh, I want to talk with you about something. Well, let's chat." And then you're like, "But you should do this."
Yeah, right. Like, you got this problem. Well, let me explain to you how you should deal with it, right?
So that's very interesting. I read this maybe a few days ago. I highly recommend walking and reading. That's a very good habit. That's a good habit I started since I got my treadmill.
Like it's not a book title; it's an actual thing that you do. Walk and read at the same time. Okay,
That's a
gotcha.
hobby. Who knows? I might write that book.
Yeah.
If there isn't one already. But no, seek first to understand, then to be understood. I think I'm thinking about my past dealing with bosses and a lot of, Hagwons are businesses. And Hagwons and the recruiters, I used to work for recruiters when I was a freelance. And I now that I think about it, I apply this principle because I wasn't very demanding. I was to okay, when I had my first kid, things changed. But before my first kid, I wasn't. Yeah, it's just kind of I was very respectful and I did the work. But anyway, I kind of tried to put myself in their position. But if you do that too much, that can be a problem as well, right?
Yeah.
You gotta fight for your right to earn. Yeah. But so yeah, so I mean, but yeah, try to understand where they're coming from. Some teachers, I don't know. What can I say that is useful? Yeah, some people just complain a lot. They complain. They compare themselves to other teachers or the bosses, and it's better to try to. I don't know. I'm trying to think of a lesson that I've acquired, but during my freelance times, I did that for a few years, and it was more work, more money, but I had a good relationship with my bosses, and I was very like, if they said, "Oh, Bruno, can you do this, that," and yeah, sure, no problem, yeah, do. And at that time I was youngish, and but a lot of I've met people who wouldn't go that extra mile,
Right.
And because they'd be like, "Oh, I already make this money, and they're not going to give me any more, so whatever." But I mean, these small things help, because later on, they would call me up and say, "Oh, Bruno, I have this job." Even after I stopped doing that,
Sure.
I have these things going on, and I got a lot of things out of it later on. So and that's part of being proactive as well, right? So if you just wait and see and don't, so you just go do it and do the small things. Help out with small things that seem annoying and you're not getting paid, but who knows? Later on, you'll benefit. You get some benefits. Yeah. So I think that's if that makes any sense, I hope that made sense. Just.
Well, it makes sense to me. I hope it makes sense to all the people that were listening, because that's who this is for, basically. Yeah.
Okay, let's go on to the next one. Synergize. And this one is obviously, synergize means you have two things, and when you combine them, the outcome is a lot bigger. You multiply, they become much more effective. And the example I'd like to make is, if you're thinking of going to a business in Korea, like working from home, you need to have a good manager. And if you can find that person, man, you multiply you reap multiples of what you've sown. And but being able to synergize, the key thing is to find that person, right? And usually it's married couples, right? I'm a bit iffy on. I would be a bit reticent to do that with someone with a Korean person that wasn't. I'm trying to. How can I put this? Yeah, I mean, when you're married, you you're one unit, and you will make things work, right? When you're not in that like that, then it's very easy for the other person to, not, they won't be as reliable. That's what I'm trying to say. But synergizing is very important. This synergy, yeah. I mean, can you think of any examples like in teaching or in your business where synergizing? You saw that synergizing was very important, or it's a tricky one. Anyway, so synergize. You got A can do 10, B can do 10. Together you'll do 100. And
yeah, I mean that's like division of responsibilities, right?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's a good point. Okay. So yeah. So I mean, when you do that, usually Okay. This is one point I like to make. When you start a small school or like working from home, you need a teacher, you need a manager, and it all comes down to temperament. Usually, one person is more agreeable, so they're better. That's, I guess, a better trait for teaching, and the other person is disagreeable. So that's good for business, right?
Yeah.
Because you need to argue, you need to, you need to fight for your income, and you need to be proactive, and all that's important to realize, and to, again, before you get into it, figure out your temperament or your big five. Where are you on the scale? Because then you can know, I'm a good manager, or I'm a good teacher, or I'm a good. I mean, any foreigner can teach, but you could be. There are good. I think there are good managers, foreign people. But again, there's the whole issue of language. That's a big hurdle. Some people can do it, but anyway. So yeah, knowing the division of labor, right? Is that So one person is.
Yeah, well, I think that's why people take on different jobs, and like when you open a business, start a business, it takes a lot more than just one skill. There's a lot more that needs to be done, and if you're one individual who's starting a business, you're going to run into problems because it's such a huge leap from being an ESL teacher, teaching, or even doing freelance work to actually starting and operating a business. And so, like one of my friends says, and I forget how he words it exactly, but one of the biggest assets to have in the business world is the ability to delegate tasks onto people who can do things better than you, essentially, right? Like if you, for example, you may have the finances, you may have the money to start a business, but you may not have the know-how on how to advertise it or how to even manage it, right? You could be in a position of an investor. You may have the cash, but you just don't have the brains. And so there are people like entrepreneurs who basically look for these kinds of arrangements. Like I have an idea, I know how to start it, I don't have the cash. So they'll find people who have the money, and they will upfront that money to them, and then the entrepreneur will run with the business. You could be a person who, let's say you do have the money and you start a business, but you don't have the skills to teach, right? So the thing you'd want to do is hire somebody to do the teaching. You manage the school, you hire somebody to take care of the phone calls or counseling the parents, whatever. So, and it's the same thing, I think, that applies to or explains the reasons for why some people run businesses and some don't. They either don't have the financial means to start a business, or they don't have the know-hows, or both. So that makes it a lot less risky and a lot more secure for people to remain in a hired position and not venture outside of their comfort zone to risk possibly losing money doing something they have absolutely no idea about, or try to stumble the way through what's the word, culminating in a complete catastrophe and and loss of, thousands of dollars, right? So I think most people are not willing to do that. The way you said it, if there's like two parties, like for myself, my wife and I, for you, your wife and you, I think we're in a position where, both you and I kind of teach, right? Well, we teach. And I don't know how it is in your case. I think your wife takes care more of the parental side, right? Like she deals with the customers. Yeah. It's the same with my wife. Like she deals with everything else. Like I talk to the head office, I take care of the books, the curriculum as much as I possibly can, and delegating tasks. But there's also Korean teachers here that we have who take care of a lot of the work. They take up a lot of the workload, like posting stuff to the parents, creating lesson plans, and things like that. So it's all about delegating responsibilities. And when you start running a business, as the business grows, you start moving away from a gombuban to a hagwon, for example. You will realize how much more you have to do, how many more responsibilities you have to take on, and so it almost seems foolish to do it as a single person.
It's I wouldn't advise unless you have really good. Again, I mean, if you have a good mentor, someone who you trust and can guide you, maybe, but it's very hard to come by.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. That's the same idea. Like you need somebody who can guide you. You need to be able to delegate tasks or find people who can do things better than you. As a business owner, I'm not an expert on, I don't talk to a lot of business owners, but it seems to me that most people who do start businesses, they must have, first of all, the capital to do so. And if they do have the capital to do so, then they will take the time to find people who can help them along the way, right? If you open a restaurant, unless you know how to cook, you will hire a cook to do the cooking for you. If you do know how to cook, then you will need to hire a manager, because you can't manage a restaurant and cook at the same time. Like it's impossible. You can't be at two places at the same time. You can be a restaurant owner and cook, but you still need somebody in the front of the restaurant. You need servers. It's the same at a hagwon, right? You can't counsel parents and teach classes at the same time. It's just impossible. And take care of all the other stuff, right? So, and for large companies, it's
on your head, right?
yeah.
On your mind.
If you look at bigger companies, nothing ever small. Companies start small. Like even look at the shysters, Bill Gates and all that stuff, right? I mean, Bill Gates stole off the ideas that he has when he stole all of that stuff, right? But none of these guys started on their own. And once companies grew, to the size that Microsoft is, I guess maybe we shouldn't compare Microsoft because it's like the biggest company in the world right now. But I mean, Bill Gates is kind of a face. Like right now he even stepped down I didn't even realize that, he's stepping down from the board of administrators or whatever the heck it's called there for Microsoft, which means that there's a whole bunch of people sitting in a room and deciding the future of the company. And Gates, who basically, quote unquote, started the company, has basically right now nothing to do with it. He's just a name, right? You know what I mean? So yeah, it's companies are never run by individual people.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, that's a whole different ball game. But the key, I think, one thing we can take from that is mentors. I think he had mentors, a few mentors, key mentors.
He must have had, yeah, of course.
And I recommend reading Outliers.
Oh, he must have had. He did. If you do the digging, there's a lot of stuff that we don't know that is not talked about. He was not from a poor family. He was from a very wealthy family. He had government connections. He was pushed more than, guided into the position that he's in right now. Microsoft would not be where it is if it hadn't been for his connections at very high government levels, basically.
I don't want to get into that too much time. No, but I read about it in Outliers. Glad is the writer, and it's a very interesting book. And he talks about, because he's an outlier in a way. And it's anyway, so let's finish off one more.
Yeah, let's do one more, because time is running, man, and I gotta get some sleep too.
Okay. So anyway, so last one is sharpen the saw.
All right. Let's
And this
sharpen that saw,
means
baby.
you have to work on your skills, work on your knowledge, work on your ability to teach, maybe to handle a business, etc. Work on yourself. I mean, reading is the best one. Just again, reading the right books, obviously. I was trying to make a list of books that could be interesting. Do you mind if I just read through them?
Yeah, go for it.
So one of them is The Present. Very small book, very classic book. Very small, very interesting book. The Present. Who Moved My Cheese? This one's about change. Two small books. Outliers is another one. Outliers is a good one. And for fathers out there, 1 Minute Father. It's a good one. I recommend this. You should read this one. It's a very small book. Same author. So The Present, Who Moved My Cheese, and 1 Minute Father. And he also has one called 1 Minute Manager. They're really old books, but they have basic principles and ideas. Yeah, those are books that can help you get started. And I mean, from there you can go to. You gotta do some research on that to find the right books for you, right? If you want to go in business, if you want to go learn certain skills, and some skills that some mentors have pointed out is people skills, learning how to read people. That really comes. And of course, knowing the big five is important, because once you know yourself and you know them, then like one thing he said, one guy said, you should try to get them to take the test and get the results, and then you can tell like what kind of person they are. And so this one's Machiavellian. No way, no, that's. But anyway, so yeah, there are a lot of skills like sales, people skills, knowing how to give public speaking. Actually, I was reading a book. There's a book called How to Make Friends and Influence People. So the same author wrote, I think it was the same author. He wrote a book on public speaking. Very, very interesting. They're all like old books, but they're still applicable to this day and age. But anyway, so
I think the approach is pretty much the same. Life doesn't change that much, philosophy or whatever. The way we live life doesn't change that much, but
people won't change them.
Yeah, we just explain it in different ways.
Yeah. We're all the same people with different clothes.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
Comes to. These are some books. One book I read recently that's very interesting and it's not related to this topic, but Man's Search for Meaning. I highly recommend that. That's more about meaning in life. So last one, sharpen the saw. You don't want to cut a tree with a dull blade. You better sharpen it, and so you get the effective results. Anyway, I think that's all I have to say. That's all I'd like to talk on the issue. And thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on.
I hope this goes viral.
Yeah. I was told many times that I gotta cut these videos down or like dissect them and put up shorter versions, because an hour and a half is hard to digest for people.
Okay.
So live streams like that are usually, whatever audience is at the present moment. That's it for the most part. Yeah. Anyway.
Okay, Jack.
Yeah. Well, let's end it together, because I don't want to be stuck here with a immobile picture of myself. So just a quick reminder here for anybody who's still here with us. There's maybe one or two people who are watching this. If you managed to sit through the end, thank you very much. If you haven't hit that like button on the video, please do so right now. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. And yeah, that's that. Thanks, Bruno, for coming on and enlightening us on your wisdomness on the topic of the 7 habits of highly effective people. I hope that it proved somewhat useful to some of the listeners, or very useful. It was definitely great, and let's do it again, man. Next time.
Yes. I'll pick a book.
Yeah, please do. And maybe I'll have time to read it through before we start. All right, Bruno. Have a good night.
Good night.
Good night. And everyone out there in Radioland, have a good night as well. Bye-bye.